Endless online searches, trekking from dealer to dealer. But here it is, the Volvo XC90. A luxury SUV that emphasises convenience and comfort. A panoramic roof, advanced air purifier, a head-up display that changes to suit light conditions, an air suspension system that ensures a smooth ride by constantly adjusting the ride height and shock absorbers. Now at special run-out pricing from $99,990 plus on-roads. Visit Volvo Cars and discover why the Volvo XC90 is the vehicle for right now.
You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from Newstalk ZB.
So, an early return to New Zealand now looking highly unlikely for 56 Test All Blacks first five Richie Mo'unga. His Japanese club Toshiba and New Zealand Rugby were in talks to forego the final year of his 3-year contract, but those discussions have stalled, and despite All Blacks coach Scott Robertson being very keen to have his Crusaders quarterback, as he used to call him, back in July, the earliest Richie Mo'unga can return to the All Blacks looks like it'll be the middle of next year, the middle of 2026. To kick this around, let's bring in Newstalk ZB Rugby editor Elliott Smith. Elliott, first of all, when you heard this news during the week that an agreement had not been reached, did that come as a surprise?
It did a bit, Piney, to be honest with you, because from what I'd heard towards the middle to later point of last year, things were on track, and there was a relative sense of, not comfort, but there was some confidence that Richie Mo'unga would be back in New Zealand at some point in 2025. I guess when the smoke signals stopped happening and the chatter died down, it perhaps became more obvious that this was taking a little bit longer than expected, and certainly had died down in terms of the chatter on that front. So at a certain point last year, it looked like it was more likely than not that he was coming home. And I think overall a bit of a surprise that Richie Mo'unga won't be back in New Zealand Rugby this year. Scott Robertson certainly wanted him back. New Zealand Rugby were dead keen on getting him back. And I think Richie Mo'unga was certainly open to the idea as well. But ultimately, New Zealand Rugby is going to have to wait now and look at the alternate plans for this year and the All Blacks.
So why couldn't they reach a deal?
Well, I think it has to be down to money. That's the only thing that I can possibly think. He's signed a deal with Toshiba. He's there for 3 years. That's what he agreed to at the back end of 2022. He would have had to leave early to come back to New Zealand Rugby early, and would have had to change his contract in some way, whether it be financial compensation, which would be the most likely, or perhaps they could have worked out some deferral of his contract through to maybe after the Rugby World Cup, but I still think that would have included some form of financial compensation. So when you've got Toshiba, who have got him locked down on a multi-million-dollar deal for 3 seasons, they've got their marketing around him, they've got pictures of him obviously in their shirt, he's won them a title, they don't want to let him go particularly easily, and New Zealand Rugby would have had to come to the party and figured out some sort of arrangement. Now, the report this week suggested that Toshiba weren't necessarily against the idea, but they would have had a number or a clause in mind as to what it would have taken for Richie Mo'unga to come home early. They haven't been able to meet on that front, and now the waiting game goes on for New Zealand Rugby. Toshiba at least know that the ongoing season in Japan League One, they'll have them until the end, which they were always going to, but they'll have them for another season as well now, which continues their ability to plan heading into to next season.
Why is Scott Robertson so intent on bringing Richie Mo'unga home early?
Well, I think you look at his Crusaders record and go, this is the player that he trusted and gave the keys to the team to for 7 seasons straight, and delivered a trophy of some form in every season there. So I think that's why, and he believes that he can unlock that again at All Blacks level. I think Scott Robertson has developed a game plan in mind at the Crusaders that he's begun to put into place at All Blacks level that would suit Richie Mo'unga's style of play. We didn't see all of that in 2024, but I think that's the player that he wants and believes he's the vital key to delivering the All Blacks World Cup success come 2027. Now, of course, Richie Mo'unga left before Scott Robertson even got the All Blacks job. That's how far back we're talking now in terms of when things were signed. It was the end of 2022 that Richie Mo'unga signed for Toshiba, and he obviously joined after the 2023 World Cup. Scott Robertson was announced as All Blacks coach on the 21st of March 2023. So there's been a lot of water, a lot of time to go under the bridge. But Scott Robertson has always known that Richie Mo'unga wouldn't be there for at least the first season. There was conversations, as we talked about, around getting him for the second season. But it has not been a surprise that Richie Mo'unga has not been there for the All Blacks. It wasn't like he signed after Scott Robertson had begun his planning. So there needs to be, a look towards playing some other players in that, which we've seen this year. Obviously, Beauden Barrett and Damien McKenzie, they're going to get more time to audition this year come season 2025. Now, Richie Mo'unga won't be at the helm this year.
You alluded to it before, but maybe just slightly expand on Richie Mo'unga's mindset here. Do you think he wanted to come home this year?
I think he was certainly open to the idea. I know he gave some media interviews last July around the fact and mentioned that obviously he did sign before Scott Robertson had become All Blacks coach. They forged a strong partnership at the Crusaders, obviously. And as you mentioned, Scott Robertson called Richie Mo'unga his franchise quarterback. So there's a lot of trust there in that level. And, if Richie Mo'unga had his time over again, maybe he wouldn't have signed a 3-year deal. Maybe he would have only gone for 2 and would be having this discussion that Richie Mo'unga potentially is coming back in the middle of the year. This is all, if, what's, maybes and hypotheticals, really. The fact is he did sign that deal, and probably there's a sense of, what if for Richie Mo'unga. He was open to the prospect, is my understanding, but obviously didn't want to upset his current employers, Toshiba, because he signed the deal with them, and, he's getting well compensated for going over and doing so. So there's a lot of plates in the air and juggling for Richie Mo'unga to do. Obviously, he's enjoying life in Japan. He's won them a title already, but I think he would definitely be keen to come back and play for the All Blacks once again, knowing it was under Scott Robertson.
How will this saga be leaving Beauden Barrett and particularly Damien McKenzie feeling when the All Blacks coach is off chasing somebody else?
Well, yeah, I think there will certainly be a sense of, well, look, we delivered a number of wins last year. Damien McKenzie started against Ireland, which was seen as, one of the benchmarks of last year, along with those South African tests. And Damien McKenzie came back from a Beauden Barrett injury and started that test and performed very, very well. We saw signs from Beauden Barrett as well once he was given the keys to the team in the latter part of the year, what he's certainly capable of. So I think they'll be, perhaps on the inside, quite perhaps happy that Richie Mo'unga is going to be at least another year away from coming back to New Zealand. They'll get another chance, you would think, to audition this year, barring perhaps a breakout star or a dominant Super Rugby season from someone that's unheralded. They're going to get another season to show their wares and perhaps go, well, look, I deserve to be the first choice player come 2026 and 2027. I guess there'll be a bit of frustration that a lot of this conversation has been held about a player that has not been in the All Blacks squad now for more than a year, has not played under Scott Robertson as an All Black, yet has dominated so much of the rugby conversation over the last 18 months since he decided to go to Japan.
So do you think this is the end of it, Elliott, in terms of this saga? There's not going to be a reopening of discussions. Now Scott Robertson just focuses on what he has and we wait for mid-2026 for Richie Mo'unga?
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe the way this has gone and the twists and turns, Piney, we very well might have another twist in the tail as yet. We're in the middle of the Toshiba season at the moment. There's a bye weekend in Japan League at the moment. Look, I wouldn't rule out perhaps another discussion. I think it would probably be unlikely, but let's not rule anything out. And the other thing is as well is that who's to say that Richie Mo'unga will necessarily come back in 2026? All the signs are there. We've talked about it, that he wants to come back to New Zealand Rugby. But if Toshiba says, look, you've landed us a title, it might be 2 by the end of this season, who knows? We want you to stick around for another 3 or 4 years. Here's the price. Who's to say that Richie Mo'unga won't come back or won't stay at Toshiba and decide not to come back to New Zealand Rugby at all? This is a saga that I don't think is finished by a long shot, Piney.
All right, lots to chat about. I'm sure our listeners will have their views, which we can take now. Thanks so much for starting the conversation for us, Elliott.
Pleasure, Piney.
Thanks, mate. That's Elliott Smith, our rugby editor here at Newstalk ZB, match commentator as well. He'll be in charge of all of the All Blacks test matches in 2025, but none of them are going to feature Richie Mo'unga.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to Newstalk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.